Yeah. Okay. Welcome everyone as we welcome in Eddie Chazan, Baruch Ian A.B. Spry with the ice back on his shoulder, Harrison Kletzel, Irving Fishbaum, Aaron Swade, Mel Zachter, Shimon Deer, great to have you, Michael, Shalom Fogel, Berish Gesseman, Mark Frankel, Matthew Guy, Marshall Castle. Yeah, with Berish it would be 9. Yitzi Muller, Yisrael Fisher, Dr. Block, Nachman Chapler, Naftali Jablin, Mordechai Sultan, Rabbi Kranz, Moshe Lehman, Ilya Shutman, Abe Arbach, Pesach Sigelman. In Pesach, we could use you down here. And we have Abba Steinhauser, David Helfgott, and Karl Loshin. We have Gedalia Engel, Reb Chaim Kramer, Rich Leonard, Saba. What's your first name? What's his name? Ruvain Pollack, Rabbi Schenkman, Rabbi Yisrael. Excuse me, what's your name? What's your name? Rabbi Kraus. Great to have you. Okay, we are holding 3 lines from the bottom of Daf Samach Daled Amud Beis. We're going to learn, sponsored by Baruch Ian, Lila Nishmas Esther Bas Yoni, Yaakov Chaim Ben Abba, Avram Ben Shmuel HaKohen, for Shalema, for Baruch Shlomo Ben Lina, by Aaron Swade, Lila Nishmas Chana Bas Shmuel, Freda Bas Shol, by Mark Frankel, for Shalema, for Chana Bas Gittel Esther, Miriam Sar Bas Tzipora, by Be'er Kolwasser, for Akos HaTov, for what Hashem did for his family, and all Chayla Yisrael, Shimon Deer, for Chayla Adaf, and Chayla Yisrael, for Shalema, for my Shver, who again had chemo today, Avigdor Aryeh Ben Rivka, Meir Ben Chayesari, Yehudis Cyril Bas Miriam. We, if you remember, we had the case, Mark, who has a big family, and he had 2 wives, an older wife, Sarah, and a younger wife, Yocheved. The older wife had 2 daughters, a older one, Leah, and a younger one, Rachel, and the younger wife, Yocheved, had also an older daughter, Chana, and a younger daughter, Penina. So we had a machloikis if Mark said, I'm being Mekadesh, the older one, if it means only the oldest of the older group, which would be Leah, or if it's all 3, Leah, Rachel, and Chana, just not Penina, who's is the youngest of the youngest, so she can be considered Gedalah. And we said we had the same suffix the other way around. If Mark said, I'm a Kaddish to Katana, does it mean only the youngest of the younger, or does it mean any one of the girls that has an element of younger? So that's what we learned yesterday. Machlokes Reb Meir and Reb Yosi. Amar Abaya now says, Machlokes b'shtei kitei banos. The Machlokes is where Mark has where Mark has 2 sets of girls, one from an older wife, one from a younger wife. Aval bekat achas. But if he just has one wife, just one wife, Mark is playing it, by the book. He just has one wife with 3 daughters. So if he has 3 daughters, Sarah, Dina, and Chaya. We used Sarah already, so let's keep Sarah out of it. Masha, Dina, and Chaya. Right? So there, the older daughter, Masha, is called the older one. The younger daughter, Chaya, is called the younger one. And the middle daughter, Dina, is called the Emtsois. So therefore, there's no suffix. So if he says the older, it means Masha. If he says the younger, it means Chaya. And if he says the middle one, that's Dina. Remember, Mark is having trouble remembering his daughters, but it's Masha, Dina, and Chaya. Masha is the oldest, Dina is the middle one, Chaya is the youngest, right? So says the Gemara. Let's see it inside. Amar Abaye machlokes b'shtei kitei banos, with the 2 groups that we learned about yesterday. Aval bekat achas, but if it's one group of girls, 3 girls. Masha, Dina, and Chaya, Divra called Gedalah Mamish. Gedalah is the oldest daughter, Masha. Katana is the Katana Mamish, the one that's Chaya. And Tzayis, Dina Bishma Karila, that he calls by her name. So Amalei Ravada Bamasnul Abaya, Elameata, if that's the case, then in the case of the two sets, Emtsoyis Shebekat Shnia, the middle one of the second group. In other words, remember that that Mark, we said, had two sets of wives, Sarah and Yocheved. If Yocheved, the younger wife, had three daughters, then the middle one of the younger group should not be a suffix of Gedalah. She should be called the middle one. She should be called by name. Says the Gemara, you're right. The case that we talked about before is where there is only two from the first wife and two from the second wife. And the Hachanami Mistavra. The Im Isa the Ika Lisnaye. Because if there was, then it should teach it. Says the Gemara, Ulatamech Emtsoyis Shebekat Rishayna, the middle one of the first group, and with Sarah's, if let's say Sarah, instead of having Leah and Rachel, she had Leah and Rachel, she had Leah, Dina, and Rachel. Well, Dina is still Gedalah because she's Gedalah than any of the girls from the younger wife. Ulatamech Emtsoyis Shebekat Rishayna, the middle one of the first wife, Devadai Sveika. Remember, we said that the father likes to give the title of the older one because it sounds good for Shidduchim. So Vasirale, and that's also Mikatanila. Does it teach that? Says the Gemara, Hachiyashka, what's the comparison? Hasam Tana Kitana Dida L'Isura. It's there, it says that even, forget about the middle one of the first group, even the one that would be younger than her, and that's the older one of the second group, right? Chana from the second group. It says that she's aser. Hasam Tana Kitana Dida L'Isura. And then of course, surely the middle one of the first wife is going to be aser because she's older than her. Hacha im isa deika, if it would be true that the middle one of the younger group is also aser, nisnaye, it should have taught it. And since it doesn't teach us, it corroborates what we said, that if you have just one group of three, when you say the older one, you mean the oldest. When you say the younger one, you mean the youngest. And when you say the middle one, you say her by name. So now the Gemara turns to another machlokes as we welcome in Richard Rosenzweig for our 29th Zoomer of the evening. It's really great to have everybody. Reuven Pollack came in. We welcome him. Richard, it's great to have you on Zoom. And not only is he on Zoom, but he's making a rare appearance. From his home in Staten Island. Says the Gemara, Richard, it's great to have you. And the Gemara now asks from a machlokes that we had when everybody says that if Rabbi Kran says that he should be aser ad ha-Pesach, he's only aser until Pesach. If he says ad sheyehei Pesach, until Pesach is, so then he's aser until Pesach is finished. Ad pnei Pesach, we had a machlokes if it means until before Pesach, or it means till the last moment of Pesach, because pnei could mean that which is before any other moment of Pesach. So the implication is that pnei could mean also the middle of Pesach. But how could pnei mean the middle of Pesach? We said that the middle you would call by name. So the Gemara asks, Amalei Rafuna B'Rei Rabbi Shula Rava, Ha Pesach. Pesach is a case of kat achas, the chi kat achas dami, or pligi, and the question is whether it means until the facing of Pesach, or until towards the end of Pesach, because the end faces the last moment of Pesach. So, but that means really the middle. And since it's one kat, we should call any middle part of Pesach by the name. So how could you think that it means till right before the end of Pesach? So Amalei, so the Gemara says, no, you're learning the wrong pshat in what was ambiguous about Ad Pnei. We're not sure if Ad Pnei means until we front Pesach, which is right before Pesach, or Ad Mefani Pesach, or until Pesach is cleaned out. Amalei Hasan Belishna de Alma Kamifligi. They're arguing about the terminology Ad Pnei Pesach. Ma'asavar Ad Pnei Pesach means Ad Kamei Pesach, until you front Pesach, in other words, right before Pesach. Or Ma'asavar Ad Mifnei Pesach, until Pesach is cleared away. Okay, we're just getting on the way. I wanted to start because people will see the very big daf and get a little bit queasy. So I wanted to let everybody know that we're on the way. But we really should have in mind we have an ongoing war in Eretz Yisrael, and all our brethren in Eretz Yisrael are affected one way or another. Really, whether the children are on lockdown, whether schools are closed, whether the shelves are empty, and of course, hundreds of thousands of people in actual harm's way of fighting in the war against these savages, and then the people that are frightened that a missile might hit their house. That's kind of frightening. Some people are afraid here of mosquitoes. They're afraid of missiles. So, it's a really, really tough way to live. So we always say a kapitel tilim, so let's do so now. Shir Amalois Esoina Yeleharim Me'ayin Yavay Ezri Me'im Adonai Yosei Shemayim Ba'aretz Al Yitain Lamayt Reglecha Al Yonam Shemerecha Yinei Lo Yonam Lo Yishan Shemer Yisrael Adonai Shemerecha Adonai Tzilcha Al Yad Yiminecha Yom Hashem Shliach Keka V'Yoreach Ba'Loila Adonai Yishmarcha Mikol Ra Yishmar es nafshecha Adonai Yishmar Tzeischa V'Yecha Me'ata V'Yadoila Ma'achenu Kol Beis Yisrael Anzun V'Tzar V'Shivya Ha'im Dimei Meyom V'Bei Me'Yabash Ha'makim Yirachem Aleim V'Yirtziam Tzar L'Avacha Mefil L'Oira U'Meshiba L'Gulash Tov Agalav Zman Karib V'Nomar Amen. We should remember that what we do now with learning, especially learning hard Gemara when we're tired, is fueling the Iron Dome. It's fueling the guns and the tanks and the airships and the helicopters of the IDF. So let's keep it up. And it's wonderful to have all of you, and all of you that came down here today. You don't know how grateful I am that you're here. I made this base of medrash that we should be able to sit and learn together. So keep it up. Keep it up. Now here's an interesting situation. Marshall tells Shpinza, I was Mekadesh you. And she says, are you crazy? Like Kiddushtani. You weren't Mekadesh me. She finds it funny. Shpinza says, you? That's funny. Right? So, who Eiser B'Kroi B'Yisrael? He's also to her relatives because he made himself a Chatika B'Yisura. He said he was Mekadesh her, so he's not allowed to marry her sister, her relatives. V'Himuteres B'Kroi. What he says, she fifes on what he says, she's permitted to his relatives. What about the other way around? He Omeres Kiddushtani. She just came out of Bellevue, and she said that I was Mekadesh Marshall. And he says, sorry girl, like Kiddashticha, I was not Mekadesh you. So who muta b'krova? He's permitted to her relatives. V'hi asura b'krova, and she's forbidden to his relatives because again, she made herself a chaticha d'isura. Kiddashticha. Now here, he tells Yocheved, I was Mekadesh you. And she says, look, Buster, you better check your glasses. You weren't Mekadesh me, you were Mekadesh my daughter. Like Kidashta Elabiti. You were Mekadesh Miriam, my daughter. So, who asa b'krayvas gedayla? Since Marshall said he was Mekadesh, the mother, Yocheved, he's also to our relatives. Gedayla muteris b'krayva. Yocheved is mutter to his relatives. Who mutter b'krayvas ketana? He didn't say he married Miriam, so he's permitted to Miriam's relatives. And Miriam said, I don't know what you guys are talking about. I was in school. Ketana muteris b'krayva. And Miriam is permitted to his relatives. We don't believe the mother that she said that she was Mekadesh the daughter. It's unlike a father, right? A father could say he was Mekadesh's daughter, but the mother can't say I was Mekadesh my daughter. I mean, there's Kidashti as Bitcha. The next case, Marshall, who's getting us into a world of trouble. Kidashti as Bitcha. I was Mekadesh your daughter Miriam. Via Emeris, she says, you're mixed up, my friend. Like Kidashta Eloisi, you were Mekadesh me. So, who also b'krayvus Kedana? Since Marshall said he was Mekadesh the daughter, so he's forbidden to Miriam's relatives. Uktana Materis b'krayvav, Miriam is permitted to his relatives. She doesn't even know what he's talking about. Who mutter b'krayvus Kedayla? He's permitted to Yocheved's relative, but since the mother said you were Mekadesh me, Ugedayla Asura B'Krayva. And again, what seems to be the thread that runs through this whole Mishnah is that if a person says I was Mekadesh someone, they're not believed, but they're believed to the extent that they make themselves a Chaticha D'Isura, and therefore they become forbidden to those persons' relatives.
Why just the relatives? If she should be usher to anybody if she's married.
She's not usher to anybody because he's not believed.
But if she said you were Mekadesh me,
yeah,
then she should be up to marry anybody else.
So we'll see that he gives her a get.
Oh,
we'll see. Let's see in the Gemara. Good question.
My job is to confuse you, Rabbi Kranz, with who I'm engaged to.
Now, no, the Pella is that it's anybody. Now,
that's for sure.
Now, if Marshall says to Shprinza, I was Mekadesh you, and then we said the other case around, if she said that I accepted Kiddushin for Marshall. So the Gemara says, why do we have to say both ways? And here the Gemara really zooms in on what Rabbi Krantz said. V'tzricha. Diyash min gabe didei. If he said I was Mekadesh her, he has really nothing to lose by throwing out such a statement. Mishum de gavra lo ichbes le. A man, he doesn't care. He doesn't care. So what, he's going to be forbidden to our relatives? He's not forbidden to anything else, right? Because he can marry more than one wife, right? So therefore, mikri yamar, and therefore he might just say it. Aval ihi, but when she said Marshall was mekadesh me, so she's thereby causing herself to be forbidden to the whole world. Aval ihi ema ilav de kimle bedibura. If not that she was sure what we said, lahavis amra. She wouldn't have said it, and therefore we should say that Marshall should also be forbidden to our relatives. Kamash Malon. No, we don't say that. Kidashticha. Now we go to the next case. Kidashticha. I was Mekadesh you. And she said, no, you weren't Mekadesh me. You were Mekadesh my daughter. So. Hasulamali. Why do I need that extra case? It's because remember I said that when she said that you were Mekadesh my daughter, maybe she should be believed just like a father is believed to say that he was Mekadesh the daughter. So Biblically, the Torah said that a father is believed to say that I accepted Kiddushin for the daughter. So midrabanan hemnua l'dida. Maybe midrabanan we should believe the mother. And if she said it wasn't me that you were Mekadosh, it was my daughter, I might think v'titza brata b'dibura. Our daughter should become Asr because of her words. Kamash Malan, that no, she's not given any nemonis about her daughter. The father is given, but not the mother. Now, the next case is Kidashti es bitcha. I was Mekadosh your daughter, and Marshall said I was Mekadosh your daughter, and the mother says, no, it wasn't my daughter, it was me. So there seems to be no chiddush in that stanza that we didn't already cover, right? If Marshall said I was Mekadosh your daughter, and the mother says, no, it was me, so the mother makes herself a chaticha d'isura, and Marshall makes himself a chaticha d'isura to the daughter. So that follows the same line as the other cases. What's the chiddush? Hasu lamali. So the Gemara says there's no chiddush. It's only for symmetry. Since it says one way, it says the other way. And since it says the case where he said I was Mekadosh you, she said no, it was my daughter. So it says the other way where he said I was Mekadosh the daughter, and she said it was me. But there's no extra chiddush in this. Now, by the way, the idea of symmetry. There's three ways to learn ID. It's very important. You know, Gedalia, if you move your vest, I could see you. I don't get to see you. So it says the Gemara. There's three ways to learn ID. Gedalia, move the vest so I could see you. There's three ways to learn ID in Shas. One way is, as we welcome in Harrison Kletzel for our 29th Zoomer of the evening, one way to learn ID is because we have to learn, in the olden days, they learned Gemara Baal Peh. And since it was the oral law, and since it was the oral law, if it's symmetrical, it's easier to remember. That's one pshat in ID. Another pshat in ID, the problem with that is that there's certain, believe it or not, Gemaras and Shas that uses ID on a pasuk. Now there you can't say it's to help us remember it, because that's Torah Shebiksav. So the other way to learn ID is it's because it makes it beautiful. La'agdil Torah ul hadira. Like in your living room, you'll say, I'm going to put one chair this way and one chair that way, that it should be symmetrical, right? ID makes it pretty. And therefore, that's the idea of ID, that it should look nicer. It should be symmetrical. It should look nicer. But anyway, the Gemara down says as follows. Itmar. Now, what happens over here? Like Marshall says, where she said, Marshall was Mekadosh me, and he says, I don't know you from Adams. She not only is also to his relative, she's also to the whole world. She needs a get. So Rav Amar Koifin. Rav says we force Marshall to give her the get. Vishmol Amar Mevakshin. We ask Marshall. Oh, good luck. Says the Gemara, Ahai. Which case? Elaima Reisha, where Marshall said I was Mekadosh her, and she says I don't know him from Adams. She doesn't need a get. She doesn't need a get. She says it's he says, she says, and she says I didn't get Kiddushin. She doesn't need it. Like Lav Kaifin of action. There's nothing to force him, and there's nothing to ask him. Ella Seifa. It's where she says he was Mekadosh me. So now she made herself also to the whole world. So the Gemara says, why should we force Marshall? Marshall should say, look, I didn't do that. But one day I might want to marry her sister. One day I might want to marry her daughter. And if I give her a get, then I can't marry. Because you're not allowed to marry Achois Grushasai. You're not allowed to marry Bras Grushasai. So Marshall, we could understand, we asked Marshall, so she shouldn't be in trouble, but how can we force Marshall? I mean, okay, it's Marshall, but if it wouldn't be Marshall, says the Gemara, Bishlam of Mavakshin L'chaye. I could understand what you ask him. Elakayfin Amai, why should we force him? Amar Marshall says, look, I don't want to restrict my field. She says some lunacy that I married her. Because of that, I have to become usher to her relatives. Says, well, you're right. You got it. And look at this, just like that, Mo Kushner comes in and we have 32 Zoomers. Wow, look at that. Marshall didn't lift a finger. The Gematria Lev. Lev, that's a really good Gematria. Says the Gemara, welcome, Mo. So the Gemara says, you're right. They're not arguing that one says we force him and one says we ask him. We can only ask him to give a get. Because he says, look, I never saw you, honey. And we could ask him, look, she has hallucinations. She made herself a chaticha d'isura. Give the poor woman a get so she could marry somebody else. But Amarav im nosan get me atzmai. If Marshall comes and offers the get, that maybe he's admitting, after the bourbon haze came off it, he's admitting it. So then we make him give her a ksuva. Kaifin Aisai li ten ksuva. And Imanami, Amarav Ada Amarav. Rav Ada said in the name of Rav, Imrla Amarav Ada Amarav Amnuna, Amarav, in the name of Rav, Kaifin Umavakshin. We force and we ask. And the Gemara says, Tarte, that's a contradiction. Hachi Kamer. Mivakshim imenu litin get. We ask him to give a get because he could say, I don't want to give her a get. I never had anything to do with her. It's her lunacy. I don't want to become asa to her relatives. However, but if he gives it on his own, then we say, oh, you're coming around that you did give Kiddushin. Then kofer said litin ksuva. Then we force him to give a ksuva. Now the Gemara looks into a new idea. Now let's get the players over here. You have Marshall in one corner and Sprinzer in the other corner. And there's one witness. Since Ruvain Pollack is sitting on the Marshall, Ruvain...
He's got guts.
He actually looks a little bit like a pancake. So
I only weigh 615 pounds. What are you talking about?
Ruvain, Marshall is Mekadesh Sprinzer in front of one witness. And both Marshall and Sprinzer say, yeah, the ceremony took place. He said Ariyat Mekadesh. What's the din? This is a very basic question. Very basic question. Only one witness. We all know that in certain circles, they say that the first kibbut in the chasana is Sida Kiddushin, the next one is Kriyas Ksuva, the next one is Bracha Achrita, but in certain circles it's the Edom, because without the Edom you don't have a marriage. And the Edom are very important. And there's a famous Maisa that I think it was it might have been the Shebina Rav. They was by a wedding, and they called up an aide, and he was mesupik about the aide's credibility. Oh, no, it was Reb Shlomo Zalman Auerbach. Reb Shlomo Zalman Auerbach. He was mesupik about the credentials of the aide. If he was kosher le'edus. But what is he going to do? He's going to embarrass the aide? So he told the aide he's not feeling so well. If he could switch with him, if this man could be Masada Kiddushin, and Reb Shlomo Zalman Auerbach will be the aide. And the man said, I don't know what to do. He says, no, I'll tell you what to do. And he had him say the bracha, and that way the bracha is not ma'akiv, and Reb Shlomo Zalman Auerbach was the aide, and he didn't embarrass the man. It's a beautiful story. It's a classic Reb Shlomo Zalman Auerbach story. I think the aide was Marshall. I couldn't resist it, Marshall.
I figured that out already.
Anyway, what would we do without Marshall? He keeps us all awake. You see, he doesn't have a problem. He has a big bottle of Coke in front of him. I know, all us people, we need the help. He has the Coke. And the Frankfurters. Anyway, so
They're in the freezer.
says the Gemara, Amar Rabbi Yehuda, HaMekadesh be'eid echad. If Marshall is Mekadesh Sprinzer with just Ruvain Palak as a witness, Ein Chayshishin L'Kiddushav. That's nothing. We all know. You have to have two witnesses. Boy, my name Rabbi Yehuda, Shnei Moedemai. What about if both Marshall and Sprinzer say, yeah, it happened? So what's the din then? In Veloy, yes, no, Verafia Biyadei. And he wasn't sure. So Itmar Amar Rav Nachman Amar Shmuel Mekadesh Beid Echad Ein Chayshishin L'Kiddushav. That's nothing. Va'afilu Shnei Moedim. Even if both the Chassan and Kala say it happened, it's no good. You need two witnesses. I mean, that's Rich says he grew up with that. Everybody knows you need two witnesses, right? Everybody knows that. So Eisvei Rav Rav Nachman. So Rav asked Rav Nachman, Ha'imel Isha Kidashticha. If Marshall says to the woman that he was Mekadosh you, B'hi Oimeris like Kidashtani, and she says it never happened, who also B'krayva? He's forbidden to her relatives. B'hi Muteris B'krayva. So, but what's the case? If there are two witnesses, in other words, if Gedalia and Chaim were there and they say, yeah, it took place like Marshall says, Amai Muteris B'krayva. Why is he permitted to our relatives? There's two witnesses. And if there's no witnesses, Amai also B'krayva. Elalav, it must be talking about Be'ed Echad. It must be talking about one witness. And the reason why he's permitted is because they don't both agree. But if they would both agree, it would be good. Says the Gemara, no. He said, I was Mekadesh you in front of Ploini or Ploini, but they're not here. So they can't give testimony. So he's also to the relatives because he said it happened. She's permitted because right now there are no two witnesses to testify. Eisvei, so here now the Gemara asks, Hamagarish is Ishtoi. Here, Chatzkel, we'll give Marshall a break on this one. Chatzkel divorced his wife. If I'm giving Marshall a break, it's pretty bad, right? Chatzkel divorced his wife, Sally. Velona imay bepundaki. And then they were together in room 208. Barish told me last night that there was an article about a carjacker being found in room 208. It's really, what are the chances? What are the chances?
Was the smoke in the car?
Yeah, no, I was wondering if it was you, Marshall. I checked, but
I don't jack them, I just fix them.
Says the Gemara, so Hamagarish is Ishta, if Chatzkel divorced his wife Sally, and then Velana Yimai Bepundaki, and then he spent the night with her in room 208 in the Hilton. Beishami remain a tzricha menu get sheni. You don't need a second get. We're not chayshish that maybe they slept together l'shem Kiddushin. Beis Hillel says tzricha menu get sheni. You do need a second get. But if you say you need two witnesses, so now what's the story? Hey chidami. If there are two witnesses, then my time I had a Beis Shammai. Why does Beis Shammai say you don't need a get? And if there are no witnesses, then why does Beis Hillel say you do need a get? My time I had a Beis Hillel. It must be that there was one witness. Elalav be'ed echad. That there was one witness. And and that's the machlokes over here between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. And Beis Hillel says that you need a get, so that would be a raya, not like Rav Nachman, that if there's one witness, you taka where they both agree, you do need a get. Says the Gemara, it can't be. We agree if they were divorced only after being engaged, so they're not yet so close to one another that then we're not worried. Because she's not that bold. He's not that bold with her. He's not that familiar that we're worried that they did something. But if there's one witness, so what's the difference if it's from Erison or from Nesuin? There was witnesses. Mali min Erison, Mali min Nesuin. Says the Gemara, no, the machlokes over here is that there wasn't witnesses that they were intimate. There were witnesses that they were alone in the room together the whole night. Where there were witnesses that they were alone the whole night together. But there's no witnesses that they were actually intimate. Beis Shammai holds, we don't say that because they were together the whole night and they were previously married, that there's a good chance that they were together. We don't say that, look, they're cheap and they saved money on getting two rooms, but it doesn't mean that they're together and there's no need for a get. Unless they were only mina erison, where it's ainli by gaspa, we say that, look, they were a married couple. If they stayed together the whole night in the room, we're very concerned that they were intimate, and therefore, and we say it might have been intimate l'shem Kiddushin, unless they weren't that close to one another because they got divorced after just being engaged. So they were never intimate in the first place. When they got divorced from a betrothal only, why? Because they're not so close to each other. So there we don't say that it's a reglaim l'dava that they were together. Aaron Swade, is it easier now that I'm teaching it? Yeah, okay. This Amud, this stuff it's a lot, but it's not as hard as yesterday's Amud Beis. Yesterday's Amud Beis was what we call a humdinger. The Baruch Hashem, Lefum Tzara Agra. No, it's funny that we use the term tzara. Tzara means the stretching of our minds, especially when we are tired. But it's not a tzar. The Torah learning is ein simcha k'simcha satayra. And the fact that there are many levels of the simcha of Torah learning. One level of the simcha of Torah learning is the fact that we know, whatever it is, if you know you're getting paid for $1 million for what you're doing, you know, Mark knows that this delivery he's getting paid $1 million. He's happy to do it. $1 million makes him happy. Even if he's delivering dirty diapers. Makes no difference. He's getting $1 million payday, he's happy. We get, for our learning, we get nitzchias. We'll get reward L'neitzach netzachim. So if you realize that, it makes you happy. That's number one. That's one reason why ain't simcha k'simchas hatayr. Another reason is knowing that we are doing what we are created for. That's a tremendous happiness. People are unfulfilled. They don't know if they're using their life right. When you're learning Torah, Bereshis, Bishvil Torah shenikra Reishis. Im lamadato Torah harba al tazik Torah l'katzmachaki l'kach mitzarta. There's a tremendous simcha in knowing that we're doing what we were created for. That's a tremendous simcha. The third simcha is the fact that when we allow our neshama, you see, the neshama is covered over with layers of the guf, but the neshama has simcha from learning. That's the Pikudei Hashem Yeshar Mesamchei Lev. Sometimes we don't feel it because we have a lot of fat, a lot of gashmias layered on, so it doesn't let us feel it. But this is the true simcha of life. So anyway, says the Gemara Vaita. By the way, again, we want to remind everybody that tomorrow night, after the daf, we have the Chumash here on Parshas Noach, and I will not be here in Fairways this Shabbos because I'm going to my son Yaakov for the Shalom Zacher. So everybody is invited down for a shir on Noach here in the shul, and of course everybody on Torah Anytime and Facebook and YouTube and Kol Haloshin and Torah Communications Network and all the different airwaves we're on. We do have one sponsor for Noach. We look for a second sponsor if anybody wants to. 718-916-3100, rmmwsi@aol.com. Says the Gemara Vaita, Amar Rav Yitzchak bar Shmuel bar Marta Mishmei Derav, HaMekadesh be'ed echad. If you mekadesh a woman in front of one witness, even though the chassan and kala are both maskim, ein chayshishin l'kiddushav. We don't pay attention to that kiddushin. Va'afilu shnei moedim, even if they both agree that it happened. Amar Rav Rabba bar Rav Huna, HaMekadesh be'ed echad. If you mekadesh a woman with one witness, beidina Rabba imrei. The great Bezdin said, Ein chayshishin l'kiddushin. Man beidina Rabba. Who is the great Bezdin? Rav. Now here Rav is saying the great Bezdin says Ein chayshishin l'kiddushin. Man beidina Rabba. Who's the great Bezdin? Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. Those are the two great people. The time of the Mishnah was Rebbe, and the time of the Gemara was Rav, right? Those are both Beidina Rabbah. Mosiv Rav Achadvoi Barami. So Rav Achadvoi Barami asks, Shnayim, look, this is, Marshall, this is one for the books. I'm going to partner you up with one of your best friends, Mark, over here. The two of you, this you could go on the road with such a case. Shnayim Shebo, we need a good woman for this. Shnayim Shebo Medina Sayam. Two men come from overseas, Marshall and Mark. The Isha Imam, and Delilah is with them. Right? So you got Marshall, Mark, and Delilah.
Our hair is too short for
and the Chavila Imam. And they have a big box of merchandise with them, a big trunk. Ze'omer, Mark says, Zu Ishti, this is my wife, Delilah is my wife. V'zeh Avdi, and Marshall is my slave. V'zeh Chavilasi, and that's my trunk. V'zeimer, and Marshall says, Zu ishti, no, that's my wife. V'ze'avdi, and Mark is my slave. V'zu chavilasi, and that's my trunk. It's full with thousands of $100 bills. The Isha Meres, I'm telling you, this is some group. The Isha Meres, and Delilah says, you see these two bums? Elu Shnei Avdi, they're both my slaves. The Chavila Shali, and it's my trunk. This is one of the wildest cases.
It's like a date I once had.
Yeah, this is one of the wildest cases. Let's get the case again over here. Right? Marshall says, Delilah is my wife, and Mark is my Eved, and that's my trunk of $100 bills. And Mark says, no, Delilah is my wife, and that's my trunk, and Marshall is my slave. And sweet Delilah says, these two guys, they're both my slaves. I'm not married to either of them, and that's my trunk. So what do we do over here? So tzricha shnei gitin, Marshall and Mark have to give a get because Mark says that she's his wife, and Marshall says that she's his wife. So they have to give a get, and the Goivik Suvasa and Delilah could, since each one gives a get, one of them is married to her, according to their saying. So, Mamanavshach, if she's married to Mark, and Mark gives her a get, Mark has to pay the ksuva. If she's married to Marshall, and Marshall gives a get, Marshall has to pay the ksuva. If it's like she says, the whole trunk is hers. So therefore, she gets the ksuva from the trunk. The rest of the trunk is munachat shiyava yaliyo, because we don't know who it belongs to. So, but the question is, why is a get necessary over here? Hey chidami, id islay sadei lahai v'islay sadei lahai. If this each one has witnesses, Marshall has two witnesses, and Mark has two witnesses, so then she wouldn't be able to say that they're my slaves. We're not sure which witnesses are telling the truth, but for sure she's married to one of them. Mi matzi amra elu shnei avdi, these are my servants, v'chavila shali. Elalav, it must be be'ed echad. It must be talking about that Marshall has one witness, and Mark has one witness. Says the Gemara, but if there is a witness contradicting another witness, we don't pay any attention. The Tizbra eid echad b'achosha mimehamen. If one witness is being contradicted by another witness, would we give it any credibility? We wouldn't need to have a get. Ella, says the Gemara, that's not what's going on over here. Lemishle la'alma, since there's no two witnesses over here, Lemishle la'alma, that she should be permitted to the world, the kuli alma le'pligi deshari. Everybody agreed she doesn't need a get. There's no witnesses over here. She doesn't need a get. V'hacha hachi kama. Here, what we're saying is tzricha shnei gitin k'dei ligvais ksuvasa min hachavila. The only way she would be able to collect the ksuva is if both Marshall and Mark offer her a get. So there, if Marshall and Mark offer on their own a get, so then she could collect the ksuva because Mamanavshach, she says the whole thing is hers, and they're both admitting to a get, so she could collect the ksuva. But a ksuva is usually only collectible from real estate. How could she collect it from a trunk? So now the Gemara asks what we've all been waiting for. My have Allah. What's the bottom line? If you have Marshall and Malka, and one witness says they got married. Right? Marshall said Ariat Mekudeshesli to Malka, and there's one witness, and they both agree. What's the din? Rav Kahana Amar Ein Chayshishin L'Kedusha, since there's no two witnesses, it's no good. Rav Papa Amar Chayshishin L'Kedusha. You need a get. Amalei Rav Ashi Rav Kahana. So Rav Ashi said to Rav Kahana, why are you so certain that it's not viable at all? My take the Yofis Dover Dover Mimaman. We learn out Xavier Shabbat Dover Dover Mimaman, which tells us that Ein Dover Shibamama in Pachas Mishnayim. So we learn out by Ishus also that you need to have two witnesses. But by Mammon, we have a din hoidos baldin k'mei edom dam. That if a person admits, it's like 100 witnesses. So imalahalan hoidos baldin k'mei edom dami, afkan hoidos baldin k'mei edom dami. So they both agree. Says the Gemara, the din of hoidos baldin is only if it doesn't affect another person. It doesn't affect another person. And there's no Aidas Baldin when it's Nageya another person. So now, the Gemara says, we're gonna now look over what the din is by Mamonas. Marzutra Rav Adasaba b'nei de Rav Mori bar Isser, two brothers, Marzutra and Rav Adasaba, the children of Rav Mori bar Isser, Polag Nichsayu Ba'adadi. They divided their estate. Now, when they divided their estate, they didn't have two witnesses. So they wanted to know. The fact that they didn't have two witnesses, does that negate the division, or is the two witnesses only in order to ensure that the other one doesn't claim that you're lying? But if you're not worried about the credibility, so then it's okay. So the Gemara now says, let's study the case. Again, Marzutur Rav Ada Saba b'nei de Rav Mori bar Isser polig nichsayu ba'adadi. They divided their estate. Also the Kamid Rav Ashi, in retrospect, they came before Rav Ashi. Amalei al pishneim edem amar Rachmana. It says that it should be done by two witnesses. Di iboil mahader loimatzi hadrebo. That if they want to renege and say that's not what happened, they won't be able to renege. Vanan loihadrek, we're not going to do that. Or maybe it's not binding. It doesn't have it's not an official division unless there's two witnesses. Amalahu, so he said to them, like Ivru Sadeh El Shakre. Only created witnesses because of the chance of lying, and therefore here we were not worried about lying, so therefore your division is valid. Now, there is an interesting shaila over here, whether this is a problem of lifnei iver loisitein michshel. Because by not having, we're not supposed to give a loan without witnesses because you're testing people. Because then they could deny it. Right? You're supposed to have witnesses. So what happened about lifnei iver over here? So we'll have to wait till the end of the sugya to address that question. We're going to stop here. This was really, really, really a full daf. Really, that case, Mark and Marshall, I don't know how you made up that case. I mean, that's.
Are you kidding? When he was in Chicago, that's how we used to date together.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't know that they had a Delilah in Chicago. But
and that's aid improving Zomerman, and then we can dig dust up with Delilah.
Please come again. Please come again.
When we talk talked about the chayv l'achrini. That case, how is it chayv l'achrini? Each one is separate than the other.
It's chayv l'achrini because they're saying that they're married.
Al-achrini means that the person that married.
Right. There's another person involved. Okay, we're going to now learn the Mishnah Yomis as the night gets more and more interesting. Hold on a second. Night. What was this daf? What daf was this? 65. Great to have you, Rich. Please come again.
I think I will.
Good. You're very welcome. Good night.